volunteer coordination, and what does it mean to organize volunteers beyond just filling shifts? So my name's Court McCracken. I work here at Get Connected by Galaxy Digital in creative communications and outreach. So I get the joy of putting together a lot of these great gatherings where we bring volunteer organizers, volunteer leaders together. If you're not familiar with who we are, Get Connected is our best-in-class volunteer management software, and we serve thousands of organizations across North America. And our software, Get Connected, is designed specifically to meet the needs of volunteer managers and their programs. So we really have designed our suite, our family of Get Connected products around what volunteer programs need. And we're really passionate about volunteer leaders and giving you the tools that you need to help in your job every day. And today we've got a special panel featuring Elizabeth Donovan. Elizabeth is the head of our Get Connected Network team, and Elizabeth brings her years of experience working with nonprofits as well as state organizations to implement tools that support sustainable programming. She's responsible for connecting communities through technology and relationships. And we're incredibly excited to welcome Lindsay Donovan today. Lindsay is the volunteer coordinator at Volunteers of America, Western Washington. Lindsay has focused on building volunteer relationships through strong coordination practices. Volunteers of America has been working to organize volunteers and taking community action for 125 years. And VOA volunteers serve with local nonprofits that meet the community's immediate needs, from emergency services to weekly programming. Lindsay's developed a really great practice of volunteer coordination that moves beyond just filling shifts and into a space of deeper community engagement. I think that's what we're all after. So how do we see these folks really engaged and a part of what we're doing? We'll also have AK Diefenbach, one of our regional managers for our Get Connected Network team. And she's going to be joining us to manage our chat box where you can ask all kinds of questions. She comes from a background working in nonprofits and volunteer management, and really works with folks in our Get Connected network on practical ways to use technology to build strong relationships with their volunteer base and community. So we'll all work together to keep this a really healthy and respectful space. We've got folks who are brand new to volunteer management and those who've been doing this for a while. So we really look for this to be just a really rich time of community and cross-pollinating ideas and offering support. And if you'd like to utilize closed captioning, you can enable that at any point in your Zoom dialog box. So we'll go ahead and get started here today. I'll do the fun part of starting my slideshow again. Amazing. Building relationships with volunteer coordination, organizing volunteers beyond filling shifts. Here's what we'll cover today: how to coordinate volunteers throughout their full life cycle in a way that builds deeper relationships. We'll also talk about the benefits and challenges of a streamlined process for coordinating volunteers. And we'll talk about practical tips and tools that make coordinating volunteers part of your program's greater vision. Stay to the end for practical tips on organizing volunteers, improving volunteer communications to make coordination easier, gaining feedback from volunteers and program leaders to improve coordination, and tools and processes that support organizing your volunteers. So let's go ahead and start a little bit here. I'll pitch it over to you, Elizabeth. What does it mean to really build relationships through volunteer coordination? If you can go ahead and get us started.
I always love these slides. It kind of grounds us in a common definition. So Court's pulled together volunteer coordination is the process of organizing volunteers to meet your program's needs by fostering meaningful relationships between volunteers and your organization. Building relationships with volunteers through their full life cycle. That's that little secret sauce. It involves aligning the volunteer's skills plus interests with their opportunities, maintaining those ongoing scheduling and communication, and then offering support. So I think that's where we're going to try to start today. And I think, Lindsay, this is where just hearing how you think about it is going to be so powerful in this presentation, because I love some of what you shared with us about how that life cycle changes, how you first greet and find a volunteer and what they start, and then where you work to continue that relationship with them, even when it's an off season, to bring them back again when the opportunity comes back around. So I don't know if I want to kick it to you for just a little bit of letting you have a chance to share too. I know we're going to tell them more about your work on the next slide, but anything there that you wanted to bring to light?
Yeah, just like Elizabeth was saying, really just developing that relationship with the volunteer, just connecting them, making them really feel in a safe spot with you, just to kind of let you know what they're doing, what they're interested in is just super powerful, huge. Letting them know that, you really want, just really appreciate them. That is so huge. We could not do it without our volunteers. So just showing, different ways of appreciation. That could be little goodies for them, or like a written card, like a mail card, just a phone call just to thank them, going out to the different sites and thanking them. So just that gratitude is huge.
There's almost like a mind shift where you're focusing more, or at least splitting your attention between a volunteer and the project, where I'm very task driven. I've got to get this thing done. And I think it's easy for us to focus on the task and forget that that volunteer is half of the equation. We've got to make sure that we're building up them, that we're supporting them. And so I love that perspective. That's great. Court, I'll let you tell us a little bit more about Lindsay. No relation. We realize both Donovans. Donovans are East Coast to West Coast. We're a very common name, I suppose, but powerful name. The clan is large.
Yeah. Well, Lindsay, why don't you share with us just a little bit about how you came into your role as volunteer coordinator, like maybe what you were doing before you started that, and then what your role looked like at the beginning of it, and what it's looking like now. That way we get a little bit of an idea of your journey.
Yeah. So I've been with Volunteers of America for about 8.5 years. I started in crisis services. I was there for 5 years and then switched over to volunteer coordinator and then vehicle donation as well. And that was about right when COVID hit. So it was like, let's make way. And yeah, so I've been doing, now I'm just focusing right on volunteer coordination.
Yeah, amazing. And can you tell us a little bit about what it was like starting off new in that role, and then sort of how you slowly started to like build up your coordination practices? Because how many programs do you recruit volunteers and coordinate volunteers for?
So we have grown tremendously. We have 8 different programs. We're up to over 600 staff members. Pre-COVID, we were about almost 300, so we doubled in size. So our organization is just growing, which is super exciting. So coming in to the role, we did not have a volunteer program for 5 years prior. So it was kind of fun just coming into it and seeing kind of what works, what needs to be changed a little bit, and just kind of having a fresh start, fresh eyes, and just kind of diving in head first, especially with COVID. But it's been exciting, challenging and exciting.
I think there's a piece to it too that I really like when you're thinking about regular shifts and then emergency needs. I think what's powerful in what you just said, Lindsay, is a lot of the group today, this is not their full-time job. They've got 3 things. You're doing emergency needs and vehicle donations and shifts and locals. What do you find has been helpful too about how you split your time, how you pivot between tasks? Is there anything that's worked well for you? Because I know that's where I get bogged down, where I end up over focusing on one hat and then I lose the next hat. And yeah, just curious.
Yes, lots of hats. I just focus on volunteer coordination now, so I can really deep dive into that. But yes, like if we have events coming up, I'm really, focused on getting volunteers, 50 to 150 volunteers with events, focusing on that. But then we have other volunteer opportunities that are coming through that need to be have volunteers for as well. So it's really just trying to set time. I've been really trying to focus on finishing each task at once and see where the highest need is, and then go from there. But yeah, it can be kind of a lot of juggling around, and then not forgetting, like you were saying, Court, to really make sure that we're acknowledging, those volunteers as well. We don't want to get away from that, because then we'll be losing volunteers, and that's something that we don't want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I know volunteer coordinators have in common is many volunteer coordinators, your key role is scheduling. And this is where we start to get into talking about, what are some of the challenges of this role? Lindsay, can you describe a little bit what your initial, when you first started in the position, what did it look like when you were trying to schedule volunteers? What was that process like?
So that process was, we came into a system and it was just like, we opened up drive-through food banks, which was amazing. We'd hand out food boxes, cars would drive through. So my main focus was getting those volunteers out to those sites. That was huge. And we did have a platform prior, so I would reach out to lots of those volunteers, the new volunteers coming through, but it was just kind of all at once. Okay, the main portion is just getting those volunteers out to those different sites so we can provide, food for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I, as a volunteer, were to reach out to you, what was it looking like at the time for me to get scheduled for a shift? What would I need to do?
So at that time, a volunteer would reach out, they'd fill out a form, and then I'd reach out to them with the different volunteer opportunities, and then they would reach back out to me, letting me know. So it was just a lot of emails back and forth and back and forth. And then with hours, it was challenging, recording the hours, because a lot of them I'd have to manually put in, and then that could kind of get put to the side. But then the numbers weren't right. So with this Get Connected platform, it's been a game changer for sure.
I always think that that's kind of the perspective of looking at your day, looking at what is eating your time. That can kind of really guide you in your role to know where would a software plug in, where would automation let me use more of my headspace. Lindsay only can do this time versus a coordination role. Because I think, the part, I think we've said this in some other webinars, is you're not just a shift scheduler. Once you've built it, you've now got to recruit for it. So you almost have to be a marketing guru and a shift scheduler. And I think, that's where I see that emphasis of when automation, like you're using Get Connected, Lindsay, when you can put that in place to handle the coordination and the actual like back and forth pick a shift, you can spend more of your actual energy going out and thinking about, how do I market one to many? What's a group I can present this to? What's a medium I can use to reach this type of volunteer, and another medium to reach this type of volunteer? So I think that's where it really starts to change from the challenge. The time is the challenge. The time is always the challenge. So how do you figure out a way to see what's costing you too much time that you can either delegate to another person, automate in a software, eliminate from the process in some way? That's a little bit of the really digging in piece, which I think that's the hardest part here, is just figuring out where to find the time.
Yeah, and I just want to let everyone know we're going to send out a copy of the slides and recording and everything to you on Monday. So you'll also get a bunch of bonus resources and a volunteer coordination planning guide. So everyone who registered is going to receive all of that. You'll get the slides. But let's talk about some of these challenges. I know that one of the volunteer leaders that I got to talk with over the last year said that when she walked into her role, she didn't even have a list of anyone who had volunteered before. She knew there were volunteers. She knew that they had been showing up, but there was no like centralized, not even like a spreadsheet or anything. So she had to kind of go and like hunt that information down and like find it and start to like build that list. And so I'm curious how many people are dealing with that. And Lindsay, I don't know if that was a challenge for you when you walked into your role, if you had to start to basically build the database up, or how you re-engaged your volunteer database. That was something that kind of came up for me when I was thinking about some of these challenges, actually.
Yeah, so the database we had, it did have volunteers in there, but it was challenging to see really when was the last time they volunteered, how many times they volunteered, if they're continuing to volunteer, when they last got, reached out to be, appreciated. So when we started Get Connected, we literally just started fresh. We just wanted solid numbers, solid volunteers. I reached out to the past volunteers to let them know, hey, we have this amazing new system, but we really just wanted to start from the ground zero so we could give those volunteers just that appreciation, and just knowing, kind of being able to follow them to see where they're at with their volunteer experience.
Yeah, those are all some really good data points that you brought up. When was the last time this person volunteered or like received appreciation, or what program were they in that they volunteered with? And so really, like, if you're using any kind of really great volunteer management system like Get Connected or any other tool that you would really want it to do those things for you. You would really want to make sure that it's taking care of some of these needs, because these are like very real challenges that affect your ability as a coordinator to be able to send the right recruitment message to the right group of people. Because I see like a lot of the folks are bringing up in the chat, things about trying to find the right volunteers for the right time and the right shifts. And so if you don't have that information saved, it's really hard to give your communication to the right person. Do you find yourself, Lindsay, like sending out, because I know you sort of keep in touch with people pretty well. Like, how are you sending messages to people for different programs and reaching out? Because I know you guys have some challenging shifts to fill that are at the overnight shelter. If you could talk a
Yeah,
little about that.
absolutely. So when they first sign up, I'll send, thank you so much for signing up for or create a profile on volunteer, through our website, and just letting them know that I'm here for them if they have any questions whatsoever. Just making them, feel comfortable. And then throughout their volunteer process, I'm really focusing on just checking in with them, seeing, how they're liking their experience, or just like I was saying, an email card just to say thank you. A lot of people don't get those handwritten cards anymore. So I feel like those are super powerful too. We all like to get a little mail, and it's not bills, right? No. And then
I'm laughing because I actually just thanked someone by text, because I don't do that, but I have gotten 2 get well cards with my ankle so far from one very sweet lady in my life. And they're both sitting on the side table, whereas everyone else is cared. I've got all sorts of messages, but there's something about mail, like having even a volunteer that helps you write just a simple personal message, or your participants sending a quick thank you, or kids drawing pictures that can be mailed out. Those tangible ones, the time is sometimes worth that effort. I love that idea.
absolutely, it's just kind of a great touch for them. So
Yeah, absolutely. Can you
Yeah,
tell us a little bit, Lindsay? I was just thinking about, one thing you shared was that your volunteer pool kind of changed during COVID. You had previously had a little older generation, which a lot of our nonprofits have, and they were trying to crack, into a younger generation. And that happened for you all. And then you were sharing how you've kind of been able to retain some of that younger generation. Can you talk about like what you think changed, what attracted them, how you kept them? Because I think that's something that's just a common challenge across the board.
very, very common. They'll volunteer once, which we appreciate. We love that, but we would love for the continuing. So yeah, certain volunteers kind of go through the cracks. But we, as an organization, so grateful. Like you were saying, we've had younger students come up. Teens, 20-year-olds really came in, stepped up when the seniors were not able to through COVID, and we were able to keep our programs going, which we were so grateful for too. But yeah, there was really that transition of the seniors who are not working, that could work at all the different programs, and then boom, they're gone. Well, now what are we going to do to get the younger crowd? And I feel like a lot of word of mouth was big as well. But yeah, it was definitely a challenging time, but thanks to the volunteers, we were able to keep on going. So
Was there anything specific? And I always think with a marketing hat, like you know what you need to recruit for, how many you need, and then your messages, like that message that might appeal to someone who is a retiree might be very different than the message that would appeal to that 20-something.
yeah.
The image might be different, the task might need to be described differently. Did you find yourself having to kind of have 2 messages out there because you need to attract 2 different audiences, 2 different personas? Or is that something that you really just found the COVID was the button that let you make that pivot?
So how we attracted, we have an amazing marketing team. So we put out an email that just said, hey, we're looking for some pop words that we want to do weekly that we'll send out through social media. And so we wanted to get the volunteer input on what they would like. And so we probably had over 80 volunteers reach out, like, oh, with just pop words. So the one that won was make a difference Difference Monday. So what we would do is for Make a Difference Monday, each Monday, we would send out like 3 of the most needed volunteer opportunities through social media. So that was really cool. That would hit out, and then people could say, oh, this is needed. And that was a great way to fill those shifts that were really, really needed at that time. So
do you find that younger generations a little more spontaneous? Like they will make that decision week of to come versus someone who is older will actually, I've mentioned my uncle before, like he's like, I can't come to your birthday party. I'm volunteering. And I'm like, I feel like you could probably get out of that. But he's like, I'm basically an employee at this place and I am going to be there. So different mentality for sure.
So true. Well, they'll sign up, and a lot of the older, will sign up shifts for so long, and then we'll have younger, some younger generation that will, already go through the process, but each time they come in, they'll sign up, so it's kind of that they like kind of the more
there.
Yes, but we do have dedicated volunteers. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
So we kind of already started to touch on this, right? Like we know what a lot of the challenges are. One, just getting your database together. If you're brand new or your program is brand new, you're building a volunteer base, you're kind of building the ship as you're sailing in it. And that can be exciting, interesting, tiring, frustrating. But it sounds like really making sure that you've got the right tools in place so that you've got, a central location to manage your volunteers, and you're getting the data that you need out of that so that you can really speak to them. Because I think that's really what it's all about. And Lindsay, what, I love talking to you about is that it's really every single time you're interacting with your volunteers through a coordination task or activity, it's really a chance to build a relationship. And so the more that, that can feel really natural and feel, like it's flowing a little more easy, then you sort of start to get some of these benefits come out, which is what we all hope for, right? Like we all really want active and engaged volunteers. I think that's the number one thing I hear most volunteer coordinators say that they're looking for. You can let us know in the chat if that's accurate. Because that's the dream come true, right? Is having active, engaged volunteers. So when they're feeling like they're really communicated with, they feel like they're a part of the conversation and they're really engaged in your program, and then they're more satisfied and more likely to be retained. And then you start really building those deeper community relationships and having a deeper impact. So those are the benefits. And Lindsay, how long in your role did you feel like you were able to kind of start to see that happen when you were brand new in the role?
It took a while, to be honest. I mean, it takes a while. You have to give yourself grace, and it's kind of that you have to give yourself grace. It's kind of that easy medium, because when you're reaching out to volunteers to thank them, you kind of got to get a feel too, because we don't want to feel you don't want to reach out too much. Oh, we have this event. Oh, we have this, so there's kind of that easy medium of not over engaging, you know what I mean? You kind of got to feel out the volunteer. But it did take a while to really get the program. And of course, we still have so much more with the Get Connected platform. I mean, there's so much to do with the system. We're really just getting into it and growing. But now I feel like I have more of a system that goes, but there's always little side gates. Oh, we got a cold weather shelter now. We got to recruit for, or we have events going. So you're always kind of moving within your system that you have.
Yeah. We had a question in the chat. Someone was asking about how do you handle check-in? I know that depending upon program, like what you really need for check-in might be a little bit different. I know with our system, we've got an app that volunteers can like check in themselves. We also have an option for like a check-in kiosk, and also per shift, people can, they can print out their roster. So I think that, my way of handling that would be different based upon what the shift is. I imagine that depending upon what the activity that the volunteers are doing is, maybe, some people could check in on their app and go right away, but you might also, for other opportunities, need someone to check in at a table. They might need to like actually see somebody. So I think it really depends on your opportunity, but I think like having options. And also my other thoughts on that, or that's something that you could go over in your orientation or your training, to tell them that that's just like part of the shift. Like when you show up, you got to check in, and here's the way you check in for the shift. That's how I would maybe address that. If anyone else has any other ideas in the chat, feel free to drop those off. Lindsay, I don't know how you all handle check-in because your programs are so diverse.
So diverse. And like you were saying, Court, just different ways, through a kiosk, through online. Even some volunteers, I will work with the program manager. They'll send me over an Excel spreadsheet, because a lot of some of the older volunteers don't, they're like, I don't care. I don't need to check in. I do it because we went to, and we do let them know, hey, it's for grant purposes. And but if they don't want to check in, I'll check them in, check them out, put their hours in, if needed to. So we work with the volunteer and see what works best for them, which they prefer doing. So, yeah.
I think that's we've heard that before, where it's like you teach them, as Court said, here's how the process works, here's how you do it. Some people need hand-holding once so they have confidence. And then that's usually a good portion of your older volunteers. Once you've walked them through it and they're confident, it's great. And then you've got that 5% that Lindsay said, they're so valuable to you that you will do it for them every single time. And that's perfectly fine, because everybody knows if they don't show, because they're almost like staff. So I think that part is meet them where they're at, do your best to minimize. You're always trying to keep everybody in the primary flow. Don't offer options to all, but accommodate where you have to. And I think that's one thing I've learned through the years is, I work for a software company. I love our tool. There's places where it is not worth your time to use the tool. Just log Court's hours for her, and she will be that amazing volunteer that constantly has the most hours of any volunteer in your program. So yeah, it's figuring out where you're hurting yourself versus speeding up something that you really need the mass group to do one way.
Big time. And we want to be able to acknowledge them, because if we're not getting them in the system for the hours, then we don't, we don't know. We have so many different programs. So
yeah. I've got
and
a
that
couple
could be
of
a
questions.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Lindsay. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just saying that can be a missed opportunity too, if we're not getting those type of volunteers into the system. So I work with the programs. That's been a goal of mine, really hard, is to work with the programs to make sure that we are getting those volunteers in so we can acknowledge them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of one of the ways that a lot of programs do like to express appreciation, is kind of using those milestones, like, hey, you volunteered 10 hours, like you're really getting started, or like, hey, you're at 50, whoa, like, and just like sending those kind of automatic things is really, really exciting. I know one person was in here, and I'm not a grants expert. However, I do have like, a couple of pieces of experience. There might be some other folks in the chat who could help with this more. But one person is asking, why do you need to record volunteer hours for grants? I know in some of the grants that I've worked on, and this is just from my limited experience, but they've asked that you show other types of support besides their grant money. So they want to know all the different types of support your organization receives. It could be in-kind donations, corporate partners, and volunteer hours, because that's a form of support to where people are performing tasks and jobs that you don't necessarily have to pay for. And so it's just kind of showing that whole piece of the pie. So making sure you've got your tools and your practices in line, being able to capture all of those pieces of information that really help your program grow. There's probably some more folks in the chat who are grant experts, but I just know that in the grants that I've worked on, we've had to show hours like that, because they wanted to know all the whole picture of support for our organization.
I think that, to chime in just for a second there, Court, that is not just limited to grants. I think the keywords I've always heard for grants too are capacity building and impact measurement. So they want to know that they invested in you, and now you can help 50 participants instead of just 10.
Right.
They want to see that you did help them because you have an hour. You show that you actually spent time with that participant. So you built your capacity, and then you measured your impact. We had this many more students at grade level in reading because of what we did. So I think the big piece just to remember is just a side bullet. It's a little off topic, but it's just remember, you've got to measure where you're at, and think about what you're going to measure for where you want to be so that you can test when you get to that date to say, did I accomplish it? Did it work? So even if you're just reporting to your director, to your internal programs or your board, that idea of we were here and now because of this, we are here. That's what a grant's looking for, but it's also just that story for your volunteers. Because of your work, we were here and now we're able to do this. I think recruitment wise, which is so big, when we're trying to reactivate a database, you've worked with us in the past. Hopefully they had a relationship or they cared about the cause. We're starting over. We've got a bold goal of reactivating 100 volunteers by the end of the month. We've got 15. You're one of them. I don't know if you can still come out and help, but can you send this email, send this post, send this to 10 of your friends that care about this cause? We want to recruit 100. We're at 50 now. Great job, guys. Like, we want to get to 100. Like, some of that is just that human nature to want to measure up, and measurements matter to people. They're motivating, they're inspiring. So don't think just stories and pictures. Numbers have power, and people feel like a goal has been reached with numbers sometimes, just as much as they're motivated in a recruitment where they see a picture, an image that they're like, I could do that. I can help with that. It goes hand in hand. It's a little bit of mixing up your marketing messages.
I really like that. And I think it kind of relates to a couple of the questions we've got too. Lindsay, I'll be interested to hear what your thoughts are on this, because, when Elizabeth was talking, I was thinking, well, I love pictures and stories and numbers secondary. Like, I'm a picture story person, right? And so I was curious, here we're talking about, here's all the things that you've got to do as a volunteer coordinator. You've got to assess how many volunteers do you need. You've got to recruit and get them going, schedule them, make sure they're matched to their ideal task. And then
As Lindsay said before, figure out how long it's going to take you to get them. Is it going to take me 3 months to fill this event up, 2 months, 1 month, 1 week? Like, where do I have to start? All of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off, but I love the timing reminder. Got to start early if you want to get it all.
And then the other part too is like that recognition piece, which you were mentioning earlier. So how do you know if somebody wants an email recognition or like a handwritten note? How do you keep track of like what people prefer, and how do you know those preferences, right? Because we're talking about preferences for check-in or preferences for receiving recognition, whereas I'm talking about how I love pictures and stories, and then to me the number is second to that. So as a coordinator, that seems like you're already doing all of these tasks. How are you supposed to keep track of what people's preferences are as far as like how they get recognized? Do you keep notes on that, or what do you do, Lindsay?
We do have the note section, but I am big into old school. I like to write down on piece of paper. I'm still that, like I was saying, I'll have sticky notes, kind of reminders. Excel spreadsheets are great. That's not my forte. I'm working on learning more, but that's what works for me, is just kind of writing them out. That's just kind of what works. But we're
Sorry, Lindsay, I was going to say, you mentioned before when we were talking earlier this week about how you do your best to make sure you interact in person as often as possible. So I think, you're able to write that sticky note because you met that person, you spent 10 minutes with them, you heard how it went that day, why they're there. Can you share a little bit about how you kind of try to work and weave that? Because you can't do that all the time. But I think a lot of our volunteer coordinators, they end up they're scheduling, but they don't get to experience the actual activity as much. So they miss that face-to-face contact. And I thought what you said was just powerful about how you've tried to, and what you do to incorporate that for feedback and relationship building and the rest of it.
Absolutely. Instead of, like you said, there's the part where you are on your computer, reaching out, getting, the shifts built. But what I've started doing is just blocking off the time on my calendar to go out to the different sites and meet them. And we are fortunate enough to have little goodies for them to show them recognition. And volunteers will be like, "Oh, it's so nice to put a face with you." Or they'll tell me, I can talk and, ask, "How's it going? How's your daughter in softball doing?" Just building that relationship and remembering, "Hey, long time no see," just like a friend. I have a lot of the volunteers are just super friendly and just showing that, that we care. And I'll go in and I'll help. I'll get next to them and help, with whatever opportunity that comes. But I've gotten great feedback from folks.
Can I ask one more question before we jump court? I just saw some questions in the chat, and I think you're in an interesting organization, so it may be harder to apples because Lindsay works for Volunteers of America in Western. But that moment of how do you get change with your leadership? How do you help your leadership understand that this time slot is not working and you would like to test a different time slot and you want to measure if it's better, or give your leadership that perspective of they don't view the volunteers as a real resource. They view them as I need that shift filled and it's kind of bottom of the totem pole. Is there anything that you would say has been sort of how you advise a program to show the value of what they're doing, to get that blessing, to put that time on their calendar, to go out to do the things or to build those relationships or get funds to do a little volunteer appreciation?
We have an amazing leadership program. They're super, super supportive. Yeah, they definitely know see the value of our volunteers. So that's very grateful for.
Have you ever had them ask you to because I'm just thinking how I would go about it if my leadership didn't believe in it. There's that moment of maybe introducing my leadership to your leadership. If there's another organization in your community that has a strong volunteerism matters voice, where you can get kind of your upper echelon to meet with theirs for lunch or to understand that. I don't know, I'm just brainstorming here, but for the chat, if you're struggling, sometimes they're not listening to you. Sometimes it is finding that peer level voice of another organization that can say, hey, you're missing out on a huge opportunity here. Why aren't you giving your resources to the volunteer coordinator? So I think that might be just a different idea to throw out. Okay, well, back on track, Court.
No, I really love that, because I think that's a reality for a lot of organizations. Lindsay works for Volunteers of America. The word volunteer comes first. So, it might be a little different in other organizations where volunteers are one piece of what you're doing. So I know that there's some folks here who are putting together their volunteer coordinator at a corporate program, right? So clearly it's a business and you're trying to engage employees in volunteerism. So how do you create enthusiasm for volunteerism in a non-volunteer first environment? That is something I want to go ahead and pose that to the group. If you've been through that before, please share ideas in the chat. Because I was talking last month with, a board, and they were talking about the volunteer program. And one of the things that, I was sharing is that it's really important to take it really seriously and take volunteerism really seriously and say volunteerism really matters to us. And it's one of our core values here. And here's why. And I think that kind of whenever I'm seeing stuff like that happen, and maybe some other folks have more experience with that. But, it's just really about kind of getting down to the why and connecting to that greater why. And that's what really I've noticed, at least for me and a lot of the folks that I've worked with, is that connecting with that why makes doing hard things a lot easier. And having that conversation, when I think about, Lindsay talking about recruiting for the overnight shelter in the winter months, I know that it's incredibly cold there. And I also know it's really important, and that it's really important that you've got a volunteer who is willing and able and enthusiastic to do it. I know some of the work that I do in the winter gets a lot less easy to do. And so it is those times to really, connect to that greater why. I think starting to find a way to tell that story and start to really build volunteerism in that way. And I don't know if that's helpful or inspiring for anyone, but I feel really taking hey, we have a volunteer program. Let's really feel the juice of how cool this is, that people want to come and they want to be a part of a community, because that's when it all comes down to it. It's that we care about each other, ultimately. And that's kind of what we're all doing here. So I know that
I love that. There's that piece where introducing a volunteer that has that juice to your leadership, so they see that person and why they are such an advocate for the program. I got a text last night that was talking about a back to school backpack distribution, and in the moment there overwhelming numbers, and they didn't have enough backpacks, and they were we wiped out Swananoa's stores because we went out and bought more backpacks real fast. So there's that moment of there's a power to that, as you said, that juice, that velocity of those volunteers in the moment doing something because they're passionate about what they see firsthand. That's so powerful for leadership to realize why that changes because what we are passionate about, what our purpose is. I think purpose was a number or word I heard in the chat. You know, when we have purpose, we'll do a lot more than we would do if we just got an email or saw a picture. Like there's a power in experiencing it firsthand.
Yeah, absolutely. And AK, I see a couple questions that are coming in. If you could drop in the chat, we've got a great blog post on 12 great gift ideas for volunteers, and some of them you can get donated from local businesses. That's another way to engage community. We've also got some great blog posts on recruitment for volunteers, for employee volunteerism and non-employee volunteerism, just general community members. So I see a lot of questions coming in about recruitment there, and I just really want to address, that's a huge topic. We've got tons of resources for you and want to make sure that you've got what you need to meet those needs. So that is tons of stuff on our blog for you, webinars on that as well. One of the things that I want to bring about is that, like, a software tool, it's not necessarily that exciting unless it frees you up to do some of the awesome stuff that Lindsay is talking about. And I know that one of the things that we've chatted about has been about how, you know, making sure that you've got this tool that streamlines your scheduling, your communication. It's a central location that your volunteers can go. That's one of the things that makes recruitment easier, is just always sending them right here, right here, right here. If you have the same place to send someone to, it becomes easier. They can just go look at it themselves. It also, you know, in Get Connected or any, you know, volunteer management platform that's worth its salt would have like a real-time updates on how many volunteers you need per shift, how many shifts are full. And I know, Lindsay, you said that you really like to use that feature to go ahead and only email the people that you need to fill for the other shifts. And also making sure that you're able to match volunteers in that. Why is this exciting? Because I feel like this has been a little bit of what you've said has given you the juice to be able to free yourself up to go build some like important community partnerships. So can you talk a little bit about, you know, what you've done with some additional time in your schedule that you've been able to kind of go out and reach out to other community partners, and what has that been like for you?
Oh, it has been huge. Instead of me like this all day, back and forth emails. Oh, can you do this? We have this, we have that. You know, now we have the system in place with everything, all the volunteers, you know, their hours, where they're at, so I can pull that up. Numbers, if our grants manager reaches out, got numbers to see where we need to improve. I mean, it's all just right here, which, like you were saying, Court, frees me up to more developing those relationships, to making sure I see how many hours that this volunteer has done, to acknowledge that. So that's been just super, super important. Also engaging different organizations within the community. We have, I believe, 23 different organizations within the community that are posting their opportunities. It's a great way to engage the different, all come together. I've built some friendships from that too, from some of the organizations. We kind of help each other out, what's working, what's not working, and then they can post their opportunities on this site, which is great. I've had volunteers reach out and go, I want to volunteer, but I never really knew how to start it, you know, and that oh yeah. So they can go to the site, the one-stop shop, whatever they're interested and their passion is, where their heart is, they can sign up for the different opportunities that they want to. So it's been great.
I think we talked a little bit too, Lindsay, about how that first time opportunity, not to forget, it's got to be easy. You've got to communicate all the details and make sure it's simple for them to get that foot in the door, because we talk a lot about that recruitment is the hard step. Relationship building can happen after that, once you have them and you're talking to them, they've been inside the building, they've done the project. So now you might move them toward a more highly qualified, more vetted, more skills-based. But again, how do you gather that feedback? And then what is your recommendation for keeping that first opportunity? How do you advise people what are the types of things? What's a good first timer opportunity, so that I'm not asking you to do a background check and 12 qualifications before you can even do one thing?
Yeah, we're really working on getting volunteer recruitment too. Like you said, this is where we were in this fiscal year. Now we're here. So we're really, trying to come up with ideas, maybe going out to some colleges, just that really community engagement to get more volunteers, because we can just sometimes just focus, and I know I do that myself, on the volunteers, that longer lasting, but it's such a key part to get when a volunteer comes to our website to reach out right away. They're engaged, they want to do that. So that's key right there. And
I
it can
love
be,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it is getting that volunteer to understand why this thing that attracted them just spontaneously, moment attracted them, they signed up, they did it. It's that next step of really letting them understand your story, what your nonprofit's working on, why what they do matters, or why their task today was pretty simple, but why the organization matters in the community, so they get bought in as an advocate. Yeah, I love that part. For keep it balanced. It's kind of like you overbalance onto one, you'll suffer the next month because you didn't get any of that new recruitment. So you've got to keep thinking about, what am I not getting ready for the next month?
Yeah, I'm big into gardening and farm chores. So I always kind of think about like, what's a little something I can do today that's gonna make a difference. Especially when I'm thinking about like my processes for something that's so big. If you look at the role of a volunteer coordinator here, this is look at everything you have to do. It's a lot. I first of all, I hope that everyone here is giving themselves some credit here. This is a robust role. You're required to do so many different things. This is everything that, and for some folks, you might be the only person on staff organizing volunteers, and it might actually only be 25 or 50% of your role. You might be doing something else the other half of the time. So, give yourself some grace there, as Lindsay said earlier, that it's a pretty robust role. And I think, what I really am enjoying about, chatting with you, Lindsay, and also hearing from everyone else in the chat, is just that when you do these things like recruiting, but you think about it as relationship building, it makes it, I feel, less stressful. It makes it more about that human to human connection. Connecting with these people in your community and what's their why do they want to serve? I think for a lot of people, they want to serve for very personal reasons. Maybe they, have experienced a need in the past, and they want to help meet that need for somebody else now that they're able. Maybe they have a heart for it because it reminds them of something that happened to a family member. I don't know, but like really connecting with people and saying like, okay, I'm trying to get this person scheduled, but using that as a chance to like, allow that to be about more than just putting them in a slot. But because I really think that that's, kind of the magic that you have as the volunteer coordinator is, I know, Lindsay, you built really great relationships, and you even got invited to somebody's wedding. That's my favorite story. And that took some time, so I do love that, thinking about that, but really going through this. And if you've got this like framework, you've got this process, it makes a lot of the other aspects of it feel like they're gonna flow. Can you pull off a full-on recruitment strategy in one day? Probably not. But if you do a little something every week, like it took you all some time to realize can you tell us about the Monday spotlight you did on social media one more time? I forgot what you called it. Motivation Monday?
Oh yeah, Make a Difference Monday. Make a difference Monday.
Make a difference Monday.
And the volunteer that thought of that, we gave little goodie box too. So I think it's great to engage volunteers, to bring them in, to feel like they have a say. I think that's big too. So
yeah, that getting that volunteer feedback is probably really vital. As we sort of round out, we've got about like 12 more minutes left. First of all, I think that something really fun to look at is all of these other skills that you have while you're scheduling volunteers and writing emails and being a recruitment expert. You're also really focusing on, empathy and interpersonal skills, conflict resolution, attention to detail. There's a lot of things here. I figure that probably a lot of volunteer coordinators here are doing 3 of these things with a great deal of excellence. And there's probably 3 more things that you're not even acknowledging yourself for, so I bet there's a lot on here that you maybe haven't even given yourself credit for, is that you're actually a really great team player. or maybe you're really strong with communication skills. So I think this is a nice chart to look at. Number one, just to say, I am doing all of these things to give yourself some credit for it, but then to also just acknowledge different aspects of the job that kind of might be labeled more as like a soft skill. They're not in the task area, but they're happening and they're taking your energy and your attention. And I think it's really important to consider that. Lindsay, would you say, the majority of your work does have to do, is it mostly centered around strong communication? Where do you feel like the majority of your time is spent?
Strong communication is huge, but also the getting the numbers. So it's just multi-task. But yeah, that communication, organizational skills, I'm not the best at. So that's why it's great to have the platform, Get Connected platform, because it's all right there, which is awesome. So I don't have a ton of sticky notes all going around. And yeah, team player attitude, passion, just showing I have passion for what I do. I love what I do. And I love our organization and what we are able to provide to those in need. And so showing that to our volunteers, like you were saying, Elizabeth, like because of what you do is where we're at now, and how we couldn't do it without volunteers. So yeah, and just motivation.
Yeah, we're seeing it in the chat, but I know the first time I saw this screen Court, I was like, you're basically writing a resume. And it just struck me, if you are a volunteer coordinator, even pseudo successful at your job, you can really do anything because you have had to think through how you will motivate people that are not paid, that you need to understand their why, you need to understand the flexibility, you need to understand the outcomes, you need to make sure you're communicating on either end to recruit and to retain them in the midst of a very hard job. When you start to dig into where your strengths are, and as Lindsay said, coordination wasn't, or organization wasn't her strength. Like that actually, like process is not always my strength. So knowing where your strengths aren't, so that you're thinking about a volunteer that can be your team player to work with you to cover those holes so that you can do what you're best at, allocate what, again, you are such an asset to your business. And I think advocating for yourself is the one thing I would encourage all of you to do, is really think, this is businessy terms a little bit, but that's what leadership often thinks about. Like they're looking at these type of terms and these are the things that you excel at. So be proud of that. That's what you bring in. That's what you bring to your organization. So yeah, I love this slide, Court. I'm glad you put it together.
Yeah, I felt like it was really important to acknowledge because, again, a lot of the things we talk about with volunteer coordination really do center around how challenging it is just to like fill these schedules and get people matched. That's a huge bulk of your time and the communication. It's a lot. And so, but I think like to make all of that happen really takes these other aspects too. And I can say when I started off in my career life, I would have not called myself technology proficient at all. Everything was like pencil and paper. I had terrible handwriting. Like I really did not think of myself as a technology person. And then within a few years into my work life, I was like building websites. And so it's just amazing what you can learn. And I recognize that some of these like soft skills, like being a team player, being willing to learn, problem solving abilities, that's what kind of helped me get there. It wasn't so much that I was really drawn to it because I wasn't, it was what needed to happen. And so I learned it and there you go. But it was those other sort of flexibility sorts of features that kind of led me down that path. So we've got a few minutes left. So we'll just do a little bonus take action. I love to leave everyone with 1 to 3 things. I hope if you leave this time today, you've got like one really nice like piece of gold to take back with you and feel encouraged and uplifted, and maybe one thing to implement that's going to make a difference for you in your program today. And we are going to email out a volunteer coordinator planning guide that's actually just going to have some questions in it that's going to maybe help you go through a similar process of what all of us are doing and asking ourselves, what's really going on here? And how can I address it to make it better, right? So that we can get the right volunteers into the right shifts at the right place and time. And it takes a little bit of thoughtfulness to get there. So this is some of what that planning guide will address: assessing your program's volunteer scheduling needs, creating repeatable volunteer communications processes, which we've got a really great volunteer communication handbook on our blog, super amazing resource, and processes and tools that make volunteer coordination easier and volunteer scheduling easier, making sure you've got what you need so that you actually can go out and build those partnerships like what Lindsay is talking about, because it really does make a difference if you've got what it is that you need. So in the last 5 minutes here, we'll just kind of see if we can pitch a few questions around, and AK is going to drop some links so that you can make sure to stay in touch with us, that you can check out Lindsay's program online. One question we've got is, how do you motivate volunteers that don't have face-to-face interaction with clients? They're doing behind the scenes work. That's a really interesting question. Lindsay, do you have any thoughts on that?
Really just taking it, well, what we do is when program managers send volunteer opportunities to us, we really look at them. We want to make sure that we're offering them a meaningful volunteer opportunity. So behind the scenes is very meaningful too. So just kind of letting them know what they're doing, what they're doing, motivating them to see, because of this is what's happening. Because that's true. Sometimes if you're not out, with the clients or whatnot, you don't really get to see that, but it's just as important with certain volunteer opportunities too. So we don't want to miss that as well.
It's almost like gauging the opportunity. Some of them speak for themselves, like a backpack drive. And then others, you've got to be more intentional. Like you're saying, Lindsay, like maybe you've got to collect testimonials from participants because you're going to share the quote because you can't see the participant face to face, but a quote from the participant about why it mattered to them, sent out with the thank you, lets them feel like they see the bigger purpose. When you send off the thing you collected and you never hear if you hit the goal or know, if anyone received it, then it's like it went into a black hole. You don't feel like you've completed the journey of that volunteer experience. So I think it's just thinking through what they're doing and what's a simple thing you can send back, whether it's a picture, a quote, a thank you message from your director that's recorded, something that can go back that just kind of completes the loop and asks them to share again with more friends and bring back people like them that care more about the cause.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask one question, Lindsay, see if you had this. It came up we do a lunch and learn with the Get Connected platform users, and it came up that just post-COVID's different. Everyone's not in office. I'm able to work full-time from my couch with a broken ankle. That's different. You couldn't have done that 4 years ago. So they're looking for like flexible schedules. That one big event they used to have, I think MLK Day was the one that was mentioned. They're having to make a month of service because they have to accommodate different groups, different times, different schedules now. Is there anything you're seeing that's just a best practice that you're seeing kind of post-COVID for recruitment that you're trying that's working well? It's a hard question. I set you up on that one.
I'm like, let me get my break now. I think just like being able to go out into the community is huge and just engage not only our current volunteers, but brainstorm where to get those volunteers, like we were saying, different colleges, schools, going out to different fairs, within the community and handing out our volunteer opportunity one-sheeters and engaging, new volunteers that way. So with COVID, where we couldn't as much, it was more just everyone's kind of, coming out, okay, going back, but now we're able to do that. So it's exciting.
And networking is an interesting one, that one-to-many, like where are those networks? I think Court, you shared a personal one from an environmental piece that was like a really hard job where people had to like carry 20 pounds for 8 hours. Like people don't come back. So I think it was what was it? It was like a road ROS or something. There's something like a club that had young students that were strong and had to get in a service hour. They found the niche group that matched the hard project. And that takes time and thought, but when you do it and it's a good fit, then it lasts because it can become a program that club, that student group always takes on.
Yeah, I think we have a couple of questions here that are kind of in that same vein, about people who have like really long processes for training and certifications. I mean, we do work with a lot of programs that have a lot of qualifications, and they are more challenging to recruit for and to retain for. But typically, once you get folks all the way through, those volunteers tend to stay. But it's like getting the number of people that you need, and that like maybe 25% of them aren't going to make it all the way through their training. So it actually means that your recruitment number is a little bit bigger than Lindsay's nodding. Lindsay knows than what you really think. If you need 10 people, you might need to recruit for 20, knowing that like some of them aren't going to make it through those hours of training. And that's just the reality. And it's not easy. I think, along with that, and Lindsay, you can back me up on this. And I know we've got to get going because we're like right at 2, but I could talk to y'all all day, but getting people to show up on time, getting people to take the role really seriously, those challenges that you have, I think that a lot of that has to do with like messaging that is happening beforehand and like during the recruitment process. And so we talked a lot about that, like kind of priming the pump for that communication in last month's webinar on volunteer opportunity descriptions. And we really talked about how that was like a framework. So if you want more detail on like kind of setting the stage for getting the volunteers you need in the right roles, that's a really great one, because you can't get them scheduled for a shift if they don't make it through training. So you got to jump that hurdle first, and you are just the people to do it. I want to say thank you to Lindsay from Volunteers of America, Western Washington, for hanging out with us today and spending time talking to us. I really appreciate you, and thank you for sharing about your program and your role. I feel like I've learned a lot in the times that we've gotten to talk. I think that everyone here was really benefited by your presence and each other's presence as well in the chat box. So I want to thank you again, because volunteer coordinators and volunteer leaders are some of the busiest people, and we get to work with you each and every day. And just to let you know again who we are, we're Get Connected by Galaxy Digital, and we make up a network of actually at this point, it's about 54,000 nonprofits and about 2.5 million volunteers. We've got volunteer management solutions for every organization, program size, and budget. You can reach out to us at galaxydigital.com or just email us directly at info@galaxydigital.com if you want more support with figuring out what tools are best for you. We're going to email out this recording along with all of the bonus resources that we mentioned. That's going to come to your inbox on Monday. So look for that email. And we hope to see you at our September webinar. That's going to be all about how building a relational volunteer culture, which we've really laid the foundation for today with Lindsay's talk, and how relational volunteer culture can actually help maximize your impact. So I think it's really cool how all these topics are connected, and we look forward to seeing you then. So thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, Elizabeth, AK, and of course, Lindsay. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. It was an honor, and thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, have a great Thursday.
Bye.
We'll see y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.